Let's go back across now to Helsinki in Finland, where we're getting in those live visuals of U.S. President Donald Trump's convoy getting into the presidential palace. In just a few moments from now, we will have the two leaders holding that crucial one-on-one meeting, which is taking place in the Finnish capital of Helsinki. Russian President will be meeting with the U.S. President in that meeting, which also comes at a very interesting time, given the backdrop and the circumstances that have made their way into the U.S.-Russia relations over the last few months, and more recently on Friday, specifically when as many as 12 Russians were indicted, were charged with U.S. 2016 election hacking. So a lot of that also going to be playing into that crucial meeting, which is to take place between the two leaders. But those are the visuals coming in from Helsinki, where that meeting is to take place at the presidential palace. U.S. President Donald Trump and U.S. First Lady Melania Trump walking into that presidential palace, which also had the Russian president walking in just a few minutes ago. A lot of anticipation, though the U.S. president has downplayed the expectations as far as those talks are concerned, saying that he does not expect too much outcome. But this is definitely a meeting that the entire international community has its eyes very much set on. This taking place in Finland, a country that Russia is very much entwined in, both financially and economically and militarily. The location is as crucial as the timing of those talks taking place between the two leaders. Later today in the evening, in just a few hours from now, there will be that joint press statement that will be delivered by the two leaders on the key takeaways, the key outcomes of those talks. Donald Trump also had given out a statement, remember, while he had declared that he does have a lot of talks on several issues to complete with the Russian counterpart, but had downplayed on the expectations, had blamed the previous U.S. presidents for the soaring of the relationship between U.S. and Russia. American President and U.S. First Lady Melania Trump walking into the presidential palace for that crucial meeting with the Russian president. This meeting, of course, coming in the backdrop of the controversy which has dominated both U.S. politics and geopolitics, and has many waiting for whether or not the entire issue of the Russian meddling in the 2016 U.S. presidential election will come up for discussion. Apart from that, there is the issue of the annexation of Crimea and the war in Syria, which is expected to also be discussed. Though there is no set agenda, there are no set talking points, there are plenty of sticking points, as many have called them. Trump is the fourth consecutive U.S. president to hold a meeting with Putin. This is the first meeting between the two leaders ever since U.S. President Donald Trump took oath of office. U.S. President Donald Trump's meeting with his Russian counterpart also coming in the wake of the 12 Russian intelligence officers who were indicted for hacking into Democratic Party computer networks. Some say that but a lot of speculation over whether or not that issue will come up for discussion, that being the elephant in the room certainly, which has in a way impacted the relationship between the two countries to such a level that the U.S. president, before he made his way for this crucial meeting, had declared that ties between U.S. and Russia have never been worse. Since the Cold War, of course, Russia and the United States have been on the two opposite sides of the spectrum, to say the least. Both of them seem to be on the path of forging new ties, though. Apart from the key issues on the table, the personal chemistry between the two will also be in focus, and will have many body language experts monitoring the developments very closely over the next few hours. In terms of temperament and in terms of style, the two presidents could not be any more different. While Putin is never caught off guard in public, Donald Trump is known to speak off the cuff. There are a host of other differences that emerge when one compares the basic personalities of the two leaders. But while Putin is off social media, does not even own a smartphone, the Kremlin often, in fact, relies on domestic media to spread the president's opinion. In sharp contrast, Donald Trump putting his opinions on social media. He is known for extensively tweeting on issues both domestic and international. Those are the visuals that we got to you of U.S. President Donald Trump and U.S. First Lady Melania Trump walking into the presidential palace. In just a few moments from now, we will have the two leaders holding that crucial one-on-one meeting. U.S. and Russia have long been adversaries, and which is what makes this meeting extremely significant. It's been an eventful few months for U.S. President Donald Trump. Two unlikely meetings, to say the least, taking place first with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and now with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Shots of the American convoy arriving at the presidential palace where that meeting is to take place. And speaking a little bit more about the relationship between U.S. and Russia, which has, of course, gone sour over the last few weeks, especially given the allegations of the Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election. And more recently, on Friday, as many as 12 Russians who were charged with the U.S. 2016 election hack. The U.S. Department of Justice had charged 12 Russian intelligence officers with hacking democratic officials in the 2016 U.S. election. So a lot of that is going to be playing into those talks, which are going to be taking place in a few minutes from now as well. U.S. President Donald Trump to meet with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in just a few minutes from now, where they arrived in the Finnish capital of Helsinki. Let's go straight across now to Fred Weyer, a Russian affairs expert joining us from Moscow for more on this. While the entire international community, Fred, has its eyes set on the presidential palace there in the Finnish capital of Helsinki, why, according to you, is this meeting a huge deal, coming, of course, at an extremely significant time?
Well, the relationship between the United States and Russia has been in a death spiral for the past couple of years. If you haven't noticed, there is a lot of urgent things that have accumulated that need to be discussed, like strategic arms control, intermediate forces treaty that is in serious trouble, Syria, Ukraine, the relationship in general. It has been more or less, I don't know, undermined, sabotaged, whatever you want to say, by this bureaucratic trench warfare that's going on in Washington for the past year and a half over Trump, over his legitimacy. All that has hamstrung not just Donald Trump, but the United States of America from going about its business and talking to the other heavily nuclear-armed superpower in the world. Even at the depths of the Cold War, when there really were profound ideological differences between the USSR and the West, they found ways to talk, to do deals, to create a structure of international stability. They haven't been able to do that for the past year and a half, and I personally doubt whether much will come out of this particular summit, but it is a long overdue attempt to reestablish a dialogue.
12 Russians indicted just on Friday, just 48 hours before that crucial meeting, Fred. To what extent do you think the Russian meddling in the 2016 U.S. presidential election will come up for discussion in that meeting?
Well, it has come up for discussion in every single meeting. I know as a journalist, whenever Putin appears in any forum with foreign journalists, it comes up. He must be sick and tired of hearing about it by now, whatever the Russians did. I don't know. If it comes up, he will do what he always does and deny any participation in that. So this is really more domestic U.S. politics than it is a Russia-U.S. issue, because it can never be resolved between Russia and the U.S. Putin's just going to deny it. The president will bring it up. This has to be resolved in the United States. There is an inquiry. The Robert Mueller investigations are ongoing. They have to come up with something that they can present in a court of law, which will give the American people closure on all this, so the United States can get back to doing business. As for charging Russian intelligence officials, I don't know. Put the shoe on the other foot. What if Russia was to launch a criminal case against 12 CIA officials, accusing them of all kinds of skullduggery and going to try them in absentia or whatever? How would Americans react to that? I think they'd laugh it off. They'd say that's ridiculous. And that's pretty much the reaction you're going to get from Russia about that. All this stuff has to be settled in Washington. And the sooner the better, I mean, for the sake of international security and stability.
Indeed, but that's what makes this meeting all the more interesting, isn't it? And the very fact that the two nations have been pretty much on the opposite sides of the spectrum on a host of issues. It's not just this issue, it's also the annexation of Crimea, it's also the war in Syria. But the very fact that the two leaders will sit across each other on one table, holding that one-on-one meeting, will be regarded as a victory for the two leaders, at least the very fact that they're sitting down and holding those talks.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that this is the only Russian expectation. I talked to a lot of Russian foreign policy experts and people, and they've been in the room with all of us for the past year and a half. They know how unpredictable Donald Trump is. They know how hamstrung he is by the bureaucratic warfare in Washington. They don't expect much, but they do think that if they have a polite, civil conversation, come out smiling, and shaking hands, that at least might signal that this acrimonious relationship has hit rock bottom and has nowhere to go but up in future.
And the very question that, strikes us before most of those crucial meetings, who stands to gain more in your eyes, Fred, given the timing of this meeting?
Well, I think I'm in between the two. I sit and have both narratives bouncing off my ears every day. And I think I stand to gain if it's successful. Really, this new galloping Cold War that we're going through is completely unnecessary. It's dangerous for the world. And if they get some kind of improvement, if they move the needle on the relationship to the positive side just a little bit, we're all going to be the winners.
We're also looking at the body language of the two leaders, which has, of course, been the talk for the last, longest time now. The comparison that one draws between the basic idea of the two leaders and the impression that one gets, from their body language, from the very fact that one is extensively on social media while the other isn't. So over the next few weeks, over the next few hours, I beg your pardon, that of course will also be one dissection that will be coming your way.
Well, they have met before. And Putin, as is we're constantly reminded, is a former KGB agent. He's very skilled. He's been president of Russia for almost 2 decades. He's a very experienced guy. So his body language is pretty neutral.
Right, Fred, I'll just come back to you. A bit of an audio glitch on your line as well. But there we have the first visuals of Russian President Vladimir Putin and U.S. President Donald Trump sitting down for that crucial one-on-one meeting. As Fred and I were just discussing just a few moments ago, there we have the body language experts, of course, will be watching every moment very closely. That, of course, is one dissection that will come up.
Конечно, настало время поговорить обстоятельно о наших двусторонних отношениях и про
These are the live visuals coming to you from the presidential palace in the Finnish capital, Helsinki.
Для того, чтобы обратили на это внимание.
And now it's time to talk in detail about our bilateral as well as some of the forums worldwide. There's one number, please, for us to make note of and discuss them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, Mr. President, I'd like to congratulate you on a really great World Cup, one of the best ever, from what everybody tells me, one of the best ever, and also for your team itself doing so well. I watched quite a bit in the United States. We call it soccer, and I watched quite a bit of it, and I watched the entire final and the semifinals, and they were really spectacular games, but it was beautifully done. So congratulations on that.
Я смотрел за играми, у нас в Соединенных Штатах эта игра называется футбол, сокер. Смотрел на финальную игру, как и полуфинальную игру. Очень интересно.
Most importantly, we have a lot of good things to talk about and things to talk about. We have discussions on everything from trade to military to missiles to nuclear to China. We'll be talking a little bit about China. Our mutual friend, President Xi.
У нас есть огромное количество тем, которые нам надо будет обсудить, очень интересные темы, начиная с таких вопросов, как торговля, коммерция, военные вопросы, также вопросы, связанные с Китаем, с ядерной политикой, поговорим также о нашем друге Xi.
I think we have great opportunities together as two countries that, frankly, we have not been getting along very well for the last number of years. I've been here not too long, but it's getting close to 2 years. But I think we will end up having an extraordinary relationship. I hope so. I've been saying, and I'm sure you've heard over the years, and as I campaigned, that getting along with Russia is a good thing, not a bad thing.
У наших двух стран есть огромная возможность для того, чтобы наладить наши взаимоотношения. На протяжении нескольких лет эти отношения не были плохие, где-то около 2 лет. Но я думаю, что есть возможность, чтобы эти отношения между нашими странами стали чрезвычайно нехорошими. Я во время своей предвыборной кампании говорил о том, что ладить с Россией сделать очень хорошо.
And I really think the world wants to see us get along. We are the two great nuclear powers. We have 90% of the nuclear, and that's not a good thing, it's a bad thing. And I think we hopefully can do something about that, because it's not a positive force, it's a negative force. So we'll be talking about that among other things.
Мы будем говорить о наших ядерных потенциалах. Мы две страны, которые содержат более 90% всех ядерных арсеналов, и это не является чем-то хорошим. Это не очень хорошая вещь, поэтому нам надо делать все для того, чтобы улучшить наше положение по этому вопросу. Я думаю, мы будем говорить непосредственно о вопросах, связанных с ядерной политикой.
And with that, the world awaits, and I look forward to our personal discussion, which I think begins now, and then we're going to meet our whole team. You have quite a few representatives on I do, and we all have a lot of questions, and hopefully we'll come up with answers, most importantly. It's great to be with you.
Своей командой большое количество людей, и я думаю, что мы сможем обсудить большое количество очень важных для нас вопросов.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
There we have the two leaders shaking hands and officially beginning those one-on-one talks, that personal level interaction that will begin now in the next few moments. U.S. President Donald Trump first beginning by congratulating the Russian leader on hosting the World Cup, which, remember, concluded just last evening. Saying that the two countries have great opportunities together, lots of good things to talk about is what the U.S. leader said, but also said that nuclear weapons are a negative force. The fact that the two nations are nuclear powers holding majority of the nuclear weapons of the world is not a good thing, calling nuclear weapons a negative force, also saying that the two leaders will be talking about a host of issues of mutual interest, of international concern, but also talking about China. Very interesting mention specifically of how the two leaders will be talking about China. Then he adds about President Xi, our mutual friend, is what the U.S. president said before the two leaders shook hands and officially started those one-on-one meetings. They will be spending some time over the next few minutes discussing a host of those issues, after which they will also be holding meetings with their aides. But this is a crucial meeting given that it's coming at an equally significant time in the backdrop of the allegations of the Russian meddling in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. It's going to be a 90-minute long personal talk between Trump and Putin, something that U.S. President Donald Trump says and adds emphasis on how the two leaders have a lot of good things to talk about, a lot of great opportunities that the two leaders have to work towards a host of those issues, but also congratulating the Russian leader for hosting the World Cup. That's how that address began. It's going to be a personal meeting now, a 90-minute long opportunity for the two leaders to discuss a lot of those issues, after which later in the evening there will be a joint press statement that will be delivered by the two leaders on the key outcomes, on the key takeaways from that meeting. Let's go back across now to Fred Weir, Russian affairs expert, joining us from Moscow for more on that. Fred, interesting how just when we were discussing the issue of body language between the two leaders, that's when the two leaders actually began with that meeting. Let me begin by asking you for your initial reaction on what the two leaders had to say before they began that personal conversation.
Well, it's pretty standard boilerplate. You know, there in these summits, I've attended a few of them, and I know the press is allowed to crowd in and take pictures and listen to the first words, which are always, pretty much irrelevant, niceties. And then the doors close and you all go out into the ante room and wait. And that's what we're doing right now. We're waiting to see what really happens. They might come out and tell us. But the tone was nice. You pretty much, I guess Donald Trump will be crucified for it in some quarters of the American political establishment. I'm sure that they're preparing their editorials in the Washington Post right now. But basically, that's what he had to say. Good World Cup, great work. We're going to have a nice talk.
I think you say that because a lot of the media reports had in fact said that Donald Trump should not even move forward with that summit when the talks were just underway, unless the president is prepared to hold Putin accountable. But in the domain of geopolitics, Fred, that of course is not a realistic possibility.
Of course not. And we have the entire half-century-long history of the Cold War to tell us how these things should go. You know, there were times in the past when they were in a nuclear standoff, like at the Cuban Missile Crisis, when Russia was supporting one side in a proxy war in Vietnam that was killing thousands of Americans. There were awful times during the Cold War, and yet they found ways to talk to each other in a civil way about the urgent issues that they had to. Now, this nonsense about Russian interference, I'm sorry, I don't mean nonsense. It's a serious issue to a lot of my friends. But this is basically about domestic American politics. They're trying to get Trump on this collusion thing. And I don't know whether they will or not, but that's up to an investigator named Robert Mueller. Meanwhile, the urgent business between the United States and Russia has to go forward. And hopefully now it will.
Right. Let me also, since you mentioned that, Fred, ask you what the last few months have looked like for Donald Trump, the deal maker. You know, a lot of credit has gone his way for first that unlikely summit with the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and another unlikely meeting with the Russian leader.
Yeah, he is something totally new and unheard of in certainly in the summit of American politics. I mean, every 5 minutes we have to stop and pinch ourselves and ask ourselves, did he really say that? Did this really happen? A lot of things are shaking loose. He's clearly a great disruptor. His performance in Europe in the past few days was one for the history books. He is really breaking down a lot of things, and it's not clear whether he has any vision or the simple ability to start building anything anew. Perhaps we can wait for that, but definitely the guy is something, and he is changing things. I don't know what will come of the North Korea summit. I mean, at least it got things off to a start. Like, I'm no Trump supporter, but I feel good when diplomats are talking, when peace is breaking out or even starting to break out. It makes me feel optimistic. And I feel that way about the summit. No kudos to Donald Trump or anything like that, but if they're sitting there talking about how we can get a dialogue going again, I think that's great.
And before I move forward, Fred, the very mention of President Xi, a mutual friend, why do you think the U.S. president chose those words at a time like this and with special emphasis being given to China?
I haven't the foggiest idea why he brought up China.
Yes.
We know that one of Donald Trump's idée fixes is that we have to get Russia on side and separate it from China. He said several times during the campaign that it's crazy to drive Russia into China's arms. And he may have some idea about how he's going to do a reverse Nixon or something and pull Russia out of China's orbit. I have no idea about that. I'm just speculating wildly. I'm sure you have the time for me to do that. But beyond that, I don't know why he brought up China. Let's wait for it.
We'll wait and watch for that, certainly. Fred, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Fred, we're breaking it down for us. Let's also get in further perspectives and additional voice joining us on the broadcast this evening. Neil Hoare, Russia analyst, joining us from Georgia. Thanks very much, Neil, for speaking with us. Let me begin by asking you what I asked Fred just a few minutes back as well. Your initial reaction to what the two leaders stated before kickstarting that 90-minute-long personal conversation.
I mean, I think it speaks to the fact that Russia is really looking to capitalize on the current moment, coming off of international goodwill following the successful completion of the World Championship. This was a time for about a month where Russia had a much better go of things in the international media and the international community than it generally has, and that there was a lot of the ongoing sports events papered over a lot of different other diplomatic problems and international feuds. Sort of the only interruption for that was the announcement in the Sergei Skripal case that there has been a UK citizen that had succumbed to Novichok, but then subsequent developments in the UK government and cabinet sort of avoided that as well. So I think that this is something that Russia especially was looking to take advantage of, and that given that they were clearly quite pleased to have this summit coming up here.
The very fact that we had as many as 12 Russians indicted just on Friday, 48 hours before this meeting. Neil, to what extent do we expect the Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election of the U.S. to actually come up for discussion?
I don't think it'll come up between Trump and Putin at all. I think to what extent it does come up. I think to what extent it does come up might be some sort of throwaway comment by Trump saying something like, oh, it's a witch hunt by the Democrats, or there's no evidence of it, and Putin has told me again that he didn't do it, so I believe him. It's because for Trump, this is a domestic political issue, and it's not something that's an actual. For him, it's the Democrats fighting back because they lost the election, and it's not some sort of issue of relations with Russia, to put it frankly.
What, according to you, was the idea behind Donald Trump specifically bringing up mutual friend President Xi? We will be talking a little bit about China, were his exact words. Why do you think in that 2-minute long statement that he made, he chose to use those words?
Well, I think it was very pointed. I think he wanted to insert China into the discussion, given the ongoing problems that the U.S. has had with China, or that rather the President Trump has had with China, and the trade war he's decided to open against them, and the tariffs he's decided to impose. And I think that he believes, and also Russia believes, that Russia is sort of a country on the international stage that's closer to China, and the country that's more so operating in that quote-unquote BRICS sphere of the countries that aren't the U.S. but are powerful internationally. I don't think this is really all that relevant in that I don't think...
All right, we're going to leave it there for the moment. Neil Hoyer, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the broadcast, helping our viewers better understand the integrities of, in the intricate details of what really transpired over the last few minutes.